Lyft are very popular ride-sharing companies that came onto the scene about 5 years ago. These companies use apps to connect riders to drivers everywhere. They have expanded to many cities across the US, and Uber has even expanded internationally. Uber and Lyft have been so successful in gaining customers that they've been slowly forcing taxis out of the market as well. In this podcast, we'll discuss some inequalities between the ride-sharing apps and taxis, and between the two companies themselves. We'll also share interviews with two drivers, where they give their opinions on how status and reputation play a part in the choices consumers make. So, let's get started.
I'm here with Jake, who is an Uber driver. Jake, thank you for taking the time today. Let's get started. So first of all, why did you choose to work for Uber?
Well, I'm in graduate school at the moment, and I have a fair amount of debt that I need to pay off eventually. So driving for Uber gives me the opportunity to gain some extra cash and start paying it off before I graduate. It was relatively easy to join and to get started quickly.
Nice, awesome. How has your experience been so far?
It's been great. I mean, there are a few passengers who have been difficult or too drunk, but that's pretty expected when you're dealing with the general public, especially on a Friday or Saturday night. Other than that, it's not too demanding of a job, and it pays a reasonable amount for what is expected.
What do you like the most about it?
I like the flexibility. It's the number one reason why I chose to begin a rideshare job, and not any other job. I can choose when and how many hours I get to work. If I have a lot of free time, and when I feel like making money, I just hop in my car and turn on the app. If I'm not too busy, there's no problem. Us drivers are considered third-party contractors instead of employees, so we create our own schedule basically.
Why do drivers choose Uber over Lyft?
For me, Uber actually ends up paying more per ride than Lyft does. That can be argued against by saying that the riders of Lyft are more friendly than others, but personally that hasn't been a problem for me. And like I said, I have debt to pay off, so that's my priority. It's a lot bigger of a company than Lyft, so there's a noticeably higher demand and more support for the drivers.
Why do you think consumers choose Uber over Lyft?
I have a hunch that it actually has to do more with the interface and reputation of the application than the company itself. A bunch of millennials love applications that look aesthetically pleasing and will tend to choose those apps over others, something that I think Uber is better at, especially when the cost comparison is marginal.
What do you think the future of transportation market is?
I know for a fact that the taxi service is largely upset with us having lost lots of business, but that's just the way the world works. Uber and Lyft provide competitive prices and, more importantly, easier access. If you're not able to compete, the market will weed you out. As for who will prevail as a single smartphone transportation app, we will just have to see who can remain competitive the longest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jake.
Of course.
So today I'm interviewing Aaron, who has been driving with Lyft for a few months. He has also been riding with Lyft and Uber for a while, and has been an ambassador, which means he helps recruit drivers for Lyft. Okay, so how's your experience with Lyft been, and do you like it?
It's been pretty good. I find that I don't drive as much as I expected I would. So I drive probably about 5 to 10 hours a week. When it's busy, it's really good. You get extra tips, which is awesome, through the Lyft app. And you get back-to-back rides usually during peak times, and surge pricing is really good for drivers because you make even more money when it's busy out. Like, for example, Saturday night, it's always surging everywhere. And it can be bad because if you're not driving during those peak hours, it can be really boring and a waste of time.
Okay. So why did you choose Lyft instead of Uber, and what are your thoughts about transferring to Uber?
So I chose Lyft because I have a friend that works for Lyft as a driver and another friend that works for Lyft as an ambassador, and I know nobody that drives for Uber, and so just to see my friends really support the Lyft company made me want to start with Lyft. So when I first decided to join the app, I was talking to some different people who drive for Lyft, and I asked them, why are you driving for Lyft and not Uber? And there were some key benefits. So first, Lyft tips, which is awesome. Uber, there's like a standard service level tipping you can do, but Lyft is a little bit more clear with that, and so sometimes passengers will tip you really well, and it'll be like a nice addition to your regular driver's pay. Their customer service is better, and the people who are in the car itself, the passengers, tend to be overall nicer than Uber based off what I heard. Again, I haven't driven for Uber, so I can't say that for sure. But as a rider myself, I find that I like riding with Lyft more as a passenger because it's more social experience.
Do you know anything about the business, like Lyft as a business, its business model, and have you had any interactions with corporate?
I know a little bit about the business model of Lyft. I also am an ambassador, which means that I try and get people to sign up for Lyft and I get a referral. That's what I did before I was a driver, and so I worked with corporate more in that setting than as a driver. They're very competitive to Uber. The corporate setting is kind of like what you would expect from a San Francisco startup. I know that one thing they do to distinguish themselves, as I mentioned before, is that they try to have pretty good customer service for both the passengers and the employees, which is great.
Which company people choose to drive for and which company they choose to drive with, like.
Absolutely. So I completely agree that there's a huge emphasis on reputation and brand quality. And I would say maybe more for the passengers than the drivers. Most drivers I know have both apps, but I think that they choose the one that ends up paying them better, because if they're almost identical, then for drivers wise, I see a lot of drivers switch between Uber and Lyft very frequently. But for a passenger's sake, passengers don't usually go out of their way to switch between Uber and Lyft to check the different prices. It's a little bit, I guess, more time consuming for passengers, and I think that because this isn't a source of income for them, it fills a different need for the passengers.
So do you think Uber's reputation has gone down since the incident with their CEO?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've seen passengers switch by the dozens, just with who I'm driving around alone. I'm sure thousands of riders switched apps. I think that Uber had a huge loss when they made that PR mistake, and I think ride-sharing apps didn't have to be political. Now they are, because Lyft donated to the ACLU, and that's a political move. That makes a statement in the political world, and Uber having the CEO on the board of directors for, is it the Trump Foundation? I don't know which company it is. So I think that was a mistake, because while most of the riders that use Lyft and Uber will probably be, like, as a percentage more left-leaning, just because the Lyft and Uber thrive in large cities, which are, as a generalization, more left-leaning. I guess Lyft has the advantage there, but if one company would have just chosen to be bipartisan, they could have captured all facets and all parties within the United States rather than segmenting it out.
One thing that I want to point out from my conversation with the Uber driver, Jake, was the point he had about Uber's application interface, status, and brand reputation. This reminded me of the same themes from Podolny's piece about reputation and status. Although his thesis had to do with the high-end service and product markets, I believe the same effects can be seen in a market where there are two very similar service lines, such as Uber and Lyft. Which consumers will choose which company if they're relatively the same? My hypothesis is that Uber is a bigger and more successful company because it has been around before Lyft, and its status is higher than Lyft's due to its more appealing application interface, publicly covered investments in autonomous driving, and its overall media coverage. All of these factors are indicators of its status and quality, making it more attractive to consumers, especially millennials.
Based on my interview with the Lyft driver, it seems like drivers and riders choose Lyft mostly because of the experience. Uber and Lyft are really comparable companies, so it all comes down to reputation. This interview makes me think that drivers will choose whatever company they've heard the most about, but riders will look to their connections, society, and the news to really decide who they want to ride with. In other countries, it seems like Uber is the only ride-sharing option, unless that country has a similar company to compete. One of our readings for class, Status Signals, really captures some main themes we've seen in these interviews. Status and reputation can negatively or positively affect business, and uncertainty about the quality of goods can lead to users leaving a brand altogether.
The future of rideshare transportation is Uber and Lyft. The reputation of Uber and Lyft, as in how they are perceived by the consumers compared to taxis, leads them to having a higher status than taxis and results in an unequal advantage. This is causing taxis to slowly be pushed out of the market and having to deal with an extreme disadvantage. When you have competing companies offering very similar experiences, the decision of which company consumers choose relies heavily on status, branding, and reputation. The way companies brand themselves creates their status, which puts them on a hierarchy compared to other companies. Companies who have a reputation of having higher status leads them to be more competitive. Uber and Lyft have a higher status than taxis. Between Uber and Lyft, Uber is perceived to be higher, or to have a higher status than Lyft, but the competition is close, and we will see if any strategical moves in branding will change their position in the hierarchy in the future.